Hey everybody! Happy April Fool's Day! I wonder if anybody out there did any April Fool's pranks on their family or if they got any April Fool's pranks played on them today. There were a couple that got played in my house today. And I think Mother Nature was playing an April Fool's joke on us because it's the 1st of April and it was snowing today. But maybe you made the best of that and you got out and made snowmen, or you were sledding in your yard, having a lot of fun, getting fresh air and staying active. So today we're going to read chapter 3 of our Tales of the Fourth Grade Nothing. I hope you've been enjoying listening to it. I've been having fun reading it with you. So chapter 3 is called The Family Dog. What do you think is going to happen? Do you think that they're going to get a dog to add to their family? They already have a turtle named Dribble. We learned in the last chapter, in chapter 2, that Peter's little brother Fudge got into some trouble with the company that they had over and covered their luggage bag in a bunch of green stickers that Mom had to take off their luggage before they left. So now we're going to read about the family dog. Nobody ever came right out and said that Fudge was the reason my father lost the Juicy O account. But I thought about it. My father said he was glad to be rid of Mr. Yarby. Now he could spend more time on his other clients, like the Toddle Bike Company. My father is in charge of their new TV commercial. I thought maybe he could use me in it, since now I know how to stand on my head. But he said he wasn't planning on having any head standards in the commercial. I learned to stand on my head in gym class. I'm pretty good at it, too. I can stay up for as long as 3 minutes. I showed my mother, my father, and Fudge how I can do it right in the living room. They were all impressed, especially Fudge. He wanted to do it, too. So I turned him upside down and tried to teach him, but he always tumbled over backwards. Have you ever tried to teach your little brother or little sister something that you know how to do and discovered that it was a little harder to teach them how to do it than you thought it might be? I think that's what Peter discovered. Right after I learned to stand on my head, Fudge stopped eating. He did it suddenly. One day he ate fine and the next day nothing. No eat, he told my mother. She didn't pay too much attention to him until the 3rd day, when he still refused to eat. She kind of got upset. You've got to eat, Fudgy, she said. You want to grow up to be big and strong, don't you? No grow, Fudge said. That night, my mother told my father how worried she was about Fudge. So my father did tricks for him while my mother stood over his chair trying to get some food into his mouth. But nothing worked, not even juggling oranges. Finally, my mother got the brilliant idea of me standing on my head while she fed Fudge. I wasn't very excited about standing on my head in the kitchen. The floor was awfully hard in there, but my mother begged me. She said, "It's very important for Fudge to eat. Please help us, Peter." Has your mom or dad or grandma or grandpa ever asked you to help out with a younger sibling or a younger relative to try and get them to do something that they wanted them to do? Sometimes we have to get really creative with little kids, sometimes to get them to do things that we want them to do. So doing tricks or being silly sometimes gets them to do that. So I stood on my head. When Fudge saw me upside down, he clapped his hands and laughed. When he laughs, he opens his mouth. That's when my mother stuffed some baked potato into it. But the next morning, I put my foot down. No, I don't want to stand on my head in the kitchen or anywhere else, I added. And if I don't hurry, I'll be late for school. Don't you care about your brother? No, I told her. Peter, that's an awful thing to say. Oh, he'll eat when he gets hungry. Why don't you just leave him be? That afternoon, when I came home from school, I found my brother on the kitchen floor playing with boxes of cereals and raisins and dried apricots. My mother was trying to get him to eat again. No, 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 Fudge shouted. He made a terrible mess, dumping everything on the floor. "Please stand on your head, Peter," my mother said. "It's the only way he'll eat." "Nope," I told her. "I'm not going to stand on my head anymore." I went into my room. I played with Dribble until supper time. Nobody seems to worry about me the way they worry about Fudge. If I decided to eat, they'd probably never even notice. Do you think that's true? I think his parents care about him a lot, but sometimes when something's happening with one sibling, the other one doesn't get the same amount of attention at that time, but mom and dad still love them. But Peter's just feeling a little left out right now. That night, during dinner, Fudge hid under the kitchen table. He said, "I'm a doggy! Woof, woof, woof!" It was hard to eat with him under the table, pulling on my legs. I waited for my father to say something, but he didn't. Finally, my mother jumped up. "I know," she said. "If Fudgy's a dog, he wants to eat on the floor, right?" If you ask me, Fudge never even thought about that, but he seemed to like the idea a lot. He barked and nodded his head. So my mother fixed his plate and put it under the table. Then she reached down and pet him like he was a real dog. My father said, "Aren't we carrying this a little too far?" My mother didn't answer. Fudge ate 2 bites of his dinner that night. My mother was satisfied. After a week of having him eat under the table, I felt like we really did have a family dog. I thought how great it would be if we could trade in Fudge for a nice Cocker Spaniel. That would solve all my problems. I'd walk him and feed him and play with him. He could even sleep on the edge of my bed at night. But of course, that was wishful thinking. My brother is here to stay, and there's nothing much I can do about it. Grandma came over with a million ideas about getting Fudge to eat. She tricked him by making milkshakes in a blender. When Fudge wasn't looking, she threw in an egg. Then she told him if he drank it all up, there would be a surprise in the bottom of the glass. The first time he believed her. He finished his milkshake, but all he saw was an empty glass. There wasn't any surprise. Fudge got upset and didn't want any more milkshakes. The next day, my mother dragged Fudge to Dr. Cohn's office. He told her to leave him alone, that Fudge would eat when he got hungry. I reminded my mother that I'd told her the same thing, and I did it for free. But I guess my mother didn't believe either one of us because she took Fudge to see 3 more doctors. None of them could find a thing wrong with my brother. One doctor even suggested that my mother just cook Fudge his favorite foods. My oldest little girl was a really fussy eater when she was younger, kind of like Fudge. And for a really long time, we made her chicken nuggets and fries just to get her to eat. So I kind of know what Fudge's mom feels like right now. So that night, my mother broiled lamb chops just for Fudge. The rest of us ate stew. She served him the 2 lamb chops on his plate under the table. Just the smell of them was enough to make my stomach growl. I thought it wasn't fair of Mom to make them just for Fudge and not for me. Fudge looked at his lamb chops for a few minutes. Then he pushed his plate away. "No," he said. "No chops." "Fudgy, you'll starve," my mother cried. "You must eat." "No chops." "Cornflakes," Fudge said. "Want cornflakes." My mother ran to get the cereal for Fudge. "You can eat the chops if you want them, Peter," she told me. I reached down and helped myself to the lamb chops. My mother handed Fudge his bowl of cereal, but he didn't eat it. He sat at my feet and looked up at me. He watched me eat his chops. "Eat your cereal," my father said. "No, no, eat cereal," Fudge yelled. My father was really mad. His face turned bright red. He said, "Fudge, you need to eat your cereal." This was turning out to be a little fun after all, I thought. And the lamb chops were really tasty. I dipped the bone in some ketchup and chewed away. Fudge messed around with his cereal for a minute. Then he looked at my father and said, No eat, no eat, no eat. My father quietly wiped his mouth with his napkin and pushed back his chair. He got up from the table. He picked up the bowl of cereal in one hand and picked up fudge in the other. He carried them both into the back bedroom. Fudge was going for a timeout. I followed down the hall behind them. My father motioned for me to go back to the kitchen. He joined us in a minute. We sat down and finished our dinner. Fudge was not happy. My mother wanted to go get him, but my father assured her that Fudge was just fine in his room, and he may even eat. I think my mother was relieved that my father was willing to take over. My brother was getting what he needed, and I was glad. The next day, Fudge sat at the table again, in his little red booster chair, right where he belonged at the table with everyone. He ate everything my mother put in front of him. No more doggy, he told us. And Fudgy never played doggy under the table again. That's the end of chapter 3. So it didn't turn out to be a real dog after all. Our chapter 3 family dog was actually Fudgy. So chapter 4 that we'll read tomorrow, I'll post another video tomorrow, will be My Brother the Bird. So maybe you can brainstorm some ideas of what you think might happen in this chapter about My Brother the Bird. Is there going to be another interesting Fudge adventure tomorrow? We'll have to wait and see. Have a fun night, friends. I really miss you. Hope you enjoyed this chapter. Can't wait for tomorrow. Bye-bye.